I'm going to say a little bit today about sophisticated boundaries. And boundaries are a very important subject for us to understand in order to take care of our lives and in order to protect our personal growth and our happiness and our relationships that we want to attract into our lives. Because understanding the concept of sophisticated boundaries means that we are more in charge of our life car, we become more in charge of the direction of our life, and we become more in charge and in control of our happiness in a very authentic way, which means that is based on our authenticity, and in a way that is based on integrity. And so, I want to say a few words today about sophisticated boundaries and what they are. First of all, a boundary is something that is put there to delineate us from something else or another person, in order to say to another person in a number of ways, this is my space and I am going to protect it. And when we protect ourselves, it can be done in a very sophisticated and dignified manner. It doesn't have to be done in an aggressive manner. It can be done in an assertive manner, which means that we can sophisticatedly maintain our boundaries in an assertive way, which means we can do it in a way that protects the other person and us in the process, bearing in mind that we are not in control of any other person's reaction to our setting our boundaries appropriately. And that's a very important word, appropriately. We need to be setting boundaries appropriately and bearing in mind our assertiveness, which needs to be carried out in a sophisticated manner also. In other words, we set our boundaries assertively, respecting the other person and respecting ourselves and our life in the process. And so, once we understand that we have a right to protect our boundaries and protect our being and to protect our life, we then need to decide what sort of boundaries we need to set. And as I mentioned in my other video on boundaries, the most important boundaries we need to set often is with ourselves. In other words, sometimes we need to have a serious conversation with ourselves, and after assessing our lives, we may need to make certain decisions regarding certain boundaries that we need to set. I.e., we could decide, for instance, that we need to set an emotional boundary and to protect our emotions in a way that is safeguarding our welfare. So an example might be, we may have a relationship or situation in our life that is damaging our emotions in some way, and we may need to decide to protect ourselves in that situation or relationship by setting boundaries, either verbally or through our actions. And as I mentioned in the other video also, our boundaries need to be backed up by appropriate actions. Should the other person not be willing to come in line with our need to protect our boundaries. And so if that is the case, then we need to know and trust ourselves to carry out appropriate action in order to ensure that those boundaries are maintained regardless of what the other person does. And so those are important points to remember there, that we have the right to set boundaries because we have the right as human beings to be able to protect ourselves appropriately, and then we need to decide what sort of boundaries we need to set. And we also may need to set a psychological boundary, which means that we need to boundary our psyche in order that another person is not able to break through those boundaries by gaslighting or brainwashing or any other manipulative maneuver that they may use in order to break down our psychological boundaries, in order to abuse or disrespect us or manipulate us in some way. And so again, what we can do is we can acknowledge what is happening, and we may need to acknowledge the fact that we need to set a boundary. And in terms of our psyche, we may decide that we are no longer going to allow someone else to interfere with our psychological welfare by setting a boundary, or possibly even by having to leave at the end of the day, if again the other person isn't going to listen to our boundary setting. We may need to set a spiritual boundary by surrounding ourselves by a shield of light so that we are protected from any outside forces that may want to step over our spiritual boundaries. And again, we need to be able to protect ourselves as far as being able to remove ourselves from any unhealthy situation which may be breaking down our boundaries inappropriately in order to have the ability to control or manipulate us. So sophisticated boundary setting really is about being very aware of what is happening in our lives and in our relationships, so that we come from a place of sophistication and we come from a very empowered place where we trust ourselves enough to identify boundary busting and boundary busters in our life, and then, importantly, to equip ourselves with the sophisticated tools in order to set those boundaries and to support them with appropriate sophisticated action, which is all done assertively and in a very safe manner. So I hope that helps, and as always, stay safe and very happy. Bye bye.